Effective air detection involves monitoring the things that are happening, looking for deviations. Threat and error management, it's an ongoing process, and you always have to monitor it.
Most pilots don't understand what career opportunities are available in the world of aviation. They're making career decisions based on advice from friends or posts on internet forums, meaning they are taking huge risks with their livelihood without having all the details. This podcast was created to help you understand the aviation industry so you can find your dream job. Let's get ready for Pushback. Here's your host and my dad, Nick Fialka.
Hey, pilot, welcome to another solo show. We are at it again. I'm so thankful. I'm grateful that you're here, and it is a pleasure to be here with you today. If you're new to this show, my name is Nick Fialka, and I am your host for today. I put out a couple shows a week. Today's episode is a solo show. Monday's episode, that was an interview. And so you'll hear them. And that's what we do here. We talk and we chat and we help make each other better. And that is what I want to do. I want to help make you better. I do this show to help give back because I feel like I have taken so much from the people in this industry and I love to give back. I'm also doing this show to make myself better and to educate myself, because this world of aviation is all about learning and all about constantly making yourself better. Seriously, guys, if you have never been flying yet, let's say you are interested in aviation and you're listening to this show because you want to be a professional pilot one day and you are not currently flying, man, I had no idea how much studying went on. I had no idea that I would be constantly studying, learning, memorizing, rememorizing again, all the time. It never stops. And it just gets more and more deep every time. When I stopped flying and I started working for a consulting company and I was just doing Excel spreadsheets, oh my gosh, man. It's like, what do I do with all this time? There's nothing else to do. I don't have to study all the time. It was unbelievable. I still, to this day, I've been flying for, I don't know, almost 23, 24 years. And I'm still like constantly in the books, constantly thinking, constantly studying. And at one point in my career, actually at a couple points, I got a chance to teach. And I got a chance to teach young naval aviators as they were learning how to fly. But probably my favorite thing that I've ever gotten to do was to teach crew resource management. And I got to teach that on the highest level in the Navy. It was the Naval School of Aviation Safety, and they had an entire division that was all crew resource management. And we would bring people in for a week and teach them all about crew resource management. And then they would take what they'd learned and bring them back to all their squadrons. And then we would go and do these quarterly meetings and assess how squadrons are doing with their crew resource management world. And it was awesome. It was so much fun. And while I was there, I got to participate in building the Navy's threat and error management model. And that is the evolution of crew resource management. I want to talk to you today about threat and error management. And the folks that created this, it is such a fascinating concept, and I want to help you understand it today. And here's what I want you to envision. The threat and error management model is like an ice cream cone. At the top, you have mission effectiveness. You have things that are going great. Everything's going awesome. It's the widest part of the ice cream cone. When things are awesome, you're at the top. And then as you get further down, the next thing you have are things that are going to take away from your mission effectiveness, and those are threats. Now let's talk about what threats can be, right? We have to be able to identify these threats. We have external factors like weather conditions. That could be icing. That could be snow. That could be rain. It could be convective activity. It could be wind shear. It could be anything having to do with the weather. Another threat could be the terrain, right? Your terrain, you could have water, or you could have rocks like mountains and stuff like that. That weather or that terrain could be a big threat. Air traffic congestion. Maybe it's an airport that's really busy. Maybe it's Atlanta, or maybe it's DFW, or LAX, or JFK, or LaGuardia, or who knows where. Maybe it's somewhere, maybe it's Paris, maybe it's Tokyo, whatever it is. Air traffic congestion could get you all the time. Another threat could be like equipment malfunctions, things are not going well, or human factors, things like fatigue. Big threats. You have to be able to identify these threats. And so you have these, imagine, right, mission effectiveness at the top of your ice cream cone. Next are threats, and you have all of these threats, and you have to be able to identify these threats. And then you have errors. Those threats lead to errors, and that's the next step down on our ice cream cone. Errors are actions or decisions that deviate from what you intended to do, whatever the intended plan was. Maybe you deviate from a standard operating procedure. And then the errors, they can occur on various levels. They could be a pilot action. It could be an ATC communication problem. It could be a maintenance procedure that has done an error. Maybe it's not even maintenance. Maybe it's manufacturing of the aircraft. I think about that Boeing MAX 900 that the bolts weren't installed and that door got sucked out. Those are errors that happen, and you have to be able to detect those errors, right? Effective error detection, it involves monitoring the things that are happening, looking for deviations, and then when the deviations happen, you have to make a change, right? But we'll get to that point. So here we go, back it to the top. We had mission effectiveness where everything's going well. Then we have our threats further down, and the threats lead to errors. And if we have many of those errors can lead to an undesired aircraft state. What does that look like? That could certainly be a crash. Could certainly be stalling the aircraft. It could be anything. It could be changing altitude inadvertently, or slowing inadvertently, or going too fast inadvertently, or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be anything major. It's just an undesired state. And so you have this undesired aircraft state that is going to be the bottom of that ice cream cone. And so you have these little segments where you have your threats, and then your errors, and then your undesired aircraft state. And at any given point, you can make a change and identify. You can look at those threats and prepare early on to mitigate those threats. And that's what we do first in the threat and error management model, is we look into what the threats could be. When I'm briefing my first officer, I'm always talking about, hey, here's what I see as a threat. We have weather today. We have convective signets. We're going to have to be moving around. We have a threat, could be a maintenance. Hey, we have a maintenance delay. Things could go long. We could get fatigued. We need to be aware of that. Maintenance is going to fix some things. We got to make sure all the proper adjustments are in the book. And we start mitigating those threats ahead of time. I also look to my FO and I say, what are your threats? What do you see as your threats? And I don't want to know just what the threats are. I want to know how we're going to mitigate those threats. What are you going to do to mitigate that threat so that we can be effective, so that we can get this flight done, we can get it out on time, we can get it back, we can get it in on time. And then further down, we have errors. Maybe you make a wrong turn on a taxiway. Not that I've ever done that before. Or maybe you get the wrong frequency and you lose communication. Or maybe you're flying and you miss the handoff, and all of a sudden you go from one air traffic controller to another and they can't find you, and you weren't listening to guard and you didn't hear them call for you. Lots of different errors. And you have these errors that you can make all the way through where nobody's ever perfect. But the key here is to repair those errors, to fix it, to find that frequency, to stop the plane, get the correct taxi instructions, understand where you are, grab some situational awareness of what's around you. And once you're able to mitigate those errors, you can repair that using crew resource management, and you can become all the way back to the top of the ice cream cone at being mission effective. Now, at the very bottom of this, we have our undesired aircraft state, because we had some threats that led to errors, and those errors compounded, and here we are in an undesired aircraft state. Maybe it's massive, maybe it's not. Maybe you forgot to put the flaps down. Maybe you forgot to put the gear down. Maybe you forgot whatever. You forgot to turn off the APU and they disconnected the thing and it all shut down because you didn't have it all hooked up correctly. It could be a lot of different things, or it could be a mishap. It could be an incident or an accident, and that's not what we want. And so if you end up in an undesired aircraft state, you have to be able to recover. Hopefully, you can still remain flying. If you stall an aircraft, you need to recover, right? You know your procedures for recovering a stalled aircraft. If you taxi the wrong way and get stuck, you need to be able to recover that. You're going to have to probably get towed off and call somebody to tow the aircraft off. If you get yourself in a bad spot and you don't have your gear down, you're going to have to go around and you're going to have to recover. And then you're going to have to get your head on straight, use your CRM, and become effective again. And once you're all the way down at the bottom of the ice cream cone there, it gets really, really hard. And it's a big, big threat. It can be a scary time to be. And so the key here is to always be spinning and looking to identify those threats, mitigate those threats, and minimize your errors so that you never end up in the undesired aircraft state. And a lot goes into that. And crew resource management is all the things that you do to help yourself be a person that can communicate effectively. And the CRM, it's the key component of threat and error management. And it emphasizes effective communication. It emphasizes teamwork. It emphasizes decision-making within a flight crew. And then it encourages you to have open communication and share that information among crew members. And if you can share that collectively among, you can manage those threats and you can manage the errors. And I'll tell you, if you're flying with some person that you don't like, CRM is hard. If you are a captain or an aircraft commander or whatever you are and you're in charge, by God, you have to make yourself available. You have to make yourself readily communicatable to that person. You have to make sure that they know they can say whatever. And whether you like it or not, you want them to call it early, not like right at the last second. You want to encourage them to communicate early and often, because then you can manage those threats. And that is key to being successful. And then it moves on to decision making, because you have to make informed decisions based on how you assess those threats and how you can manage those errors. And that includes whether to continue the flight or divert or take some other action to maintain safety. Decision-making in threat and error management is a collaborative process. It involves getting input from that entire team. But then at the end of the day, it's that guy or gal that's in charge that's going to make that decision. And you have to be able to make that decision based on the input from your team. We talked about error recovery, right? With error recovery, you have to be able to put in a corrective action. You have to be able to reevaluate your decisions. You have to be able to adjust your plan based on the new information that you have. And then you have to be able to adapt to those conditions. And so if you can do that, you can recover from any kind of error as long as the plane is still flying. Threat and error management, it's an ongoing process, and you always have to monitor it. You always have to be, whether you're a pilot flying or you're a pilot monitoring, or you have 3 or 4 pilots in the aircraft, you always have to be monitoring the environment for new threats, and you have to bring them forward as they come, because it's like Galaga. It's like you just keep shooting the aliens as they're coming towards you, and the next threats are just still coming. You have to keep monitoring, and the further ahead you can monitor, the more successful you're going to be, and that allows you to be proactive. And finally, the other thing you need to do is educate and train. You have to go to the sim. You have to learn the plane. You have to go through all the processes that they put in place. But you also have to educate yourself to get better at the aircraft, to understand how it operates, but also how to dive deeper into threat and error management and how to dive deeper and to be better at crew resource management. And I'll tell you, those of you that are military, that have flown helicopters or heavies or multi-piloted aircraft, your crew resource management capabilities are pretty good. Usually, not always, but usually pretty good. my fighter guys and gals or my people that have come up flying by themselves in the civilian world and not having crews that they work with and not educating themselves on crew resource management, like you guys struggle. And I see it. Bringing that out into the open is really hard. And I really think that the airlines are just pretty okay at it. They're not amazing. I think that the military dives deeper into crew resource management, but I think that the civilian sector that studies crew resource management is also amazing. I think that there's a lot that the airlines could take and grow their capabilities because really you have thousands of pilots that you have to be able to train, and it's just really hard to do. And that's a fact of life. It's really hard to train this new concept and really be effective with it. And so it's on you, the pilot, to make yourself better at it. And then it's on you, the pilot, to make that person sitting next to you as good or better than you. And threat and error management is such a cool concept, such an interesting thing. It's got a big place in my heart. And so I think that there's a lot to learn. And this is just a primer, right? There's research upon research upon research. And this conversation, hopefully it's not too confusing for you. But basically what it comes down to is if you see something, say something. Keep the aircraft safe. Identify where your threats are and mitigate them early. If you can do that, you can be way more successful than if you're just along for the ride. And so don't be along for the ride. Be along for the win. All right? So until next time, I'll catch you later, guys. Thanks for listening to the show. You're the best.